Hello, everyone. Welcome to this Monday's This Is Not Therapy Hour, brought to you by Effective Artistry. My name is Marie. I'm an executive functioning coach at Effective Artistry, which is a neurodiversity affirming therapy practice based out of Northbrook, Illinois. I'm joined, as always, by Brandon Tessers, LCPC therapist and clinical director of Effective Artistry. Hi, Brandon. Good to be with you.
I'm very good to be with you.
Normally we would have Caitlin with us as well, Caitlin Miller, LCP. She can't join us today, unfortunately, but hopefully she'll be back again on Monday. How are you doing this week, Brandon?
Doing all right. Been sleeping okay. Kids have been sick. That's a bummer, but still doing all right. How are you?
I'm all right, thank you. I had a nice weekend. My my person was here for a visit, so we had a really lovely weekend of hanging out, eating a lot of food, watching a lot of movies. It was very relaxing, so feeling good.
Glad to hear it. Yeah, it's like the old
Um,
you and me today.
Pardon?
It's like the old days, just you and me today.
Yeah, yeah. So, I don't know if there's anything in particular on your mind that you'd like to talk about. I had one topic suggestion today based on something that came up on social media. But if there's anything that's on your mind that you'd like to,
No, I'd be happy to jump into your topic. And for anyone here, if you are here, just including the person who asked a long time, I it's bugging me that I never got around to addressing the concern someone brought up about how to support a child with speech delays. And I
oh
keep
yeah.
waiting for the person to show back up so that we can talk about it. If you're here, let us know. But if you're here and you want to talk about anything, let us know in the comments. Otherwise, yeah, what's the topic that's on your mind, right?
So it was somebody on new social media, Blue Sky. There's too many social networks to keep track of now. But I was on Blue Sky today, and I mentioned that we would be streaming this afternoon. And we got one comment that said, I always find it hard drawing a line between healthy, regular sharing and obsession. It's hard to know where the line is, and for ASD, autistic spectrum disorder peeps, really hard, which then makes me anxious and overthink, and then I give up completely as the only solid solution. So I guess it's anxiety about what sharing versus oversharing, and also talks about obsessing and fixations.
I like that. I'm going to pour my tea. I'll be right back.
All right. Okay. So if you're the person who dropped that comment in the chat on Blue Sky, thank you, and hopefully we can tease that out today. A little bit more about Effective Artistry. It's a coaching and therapy practice based in Northbrook, Illinois. And so the therapists at the practice are licensed to work with anyone in the state of Illinois. And there are also a couple of executive functioning coaches, myself and Sarah Geis, and we can work with you anywhere you are in the world. So I'm based in Scotland in the UK, but I work with clients in the US as well. Um, so yeah, just going back to that question or topic, trying to find the line between sharing or being obsessive or fixating or oversharing. So it's two things in one there: sharing, oversharing, fixating versus obsessing, and where's the line?
Yeah, well, the very annoying but always accurate answer is, well, it depends.
Yeah.
Uh, and we'll be more specific and helpful than that. But the first question will be that each person has to define for themselves what is the difference between sharing and oversharing, not in terms of being able to predict where the line is or whatever, but in what is it that must change for sharing to now be oversharing. Mostly people are going to say something, I'm guessing, mostly people will say something like, well, when I'm sharing more than the other person wants me to.
Yeah.
That's the difference. If they like what you're sharing, then it's sharing. If they don't like how much you're sharing, they liked some of it, but now they want to move on and it's too much or whatever, then you would call it oversharing. And in that case, how do you know where the line is? How would you know where the line is? This is one of those. The real and practical answer is it's different for every person, every topic, and every context.
Yeah.
It's not something that you can predict. You can as with any of these things that can't be determined by some hard and fast rule of like, well, this is sharing, this is oversharing, or this is being vulnerable and relating, and this is trauma dumping, or, this is relating with an anecdote from my past, this is making it about me. All these things depend on how people are interpreting things, not just you. It's my dad making a joke about knowing oversharing, which I totally get and have teased him about, and I have been teased a lot about, including, for example, pointing out that it's my dad in the comments, right? Like, I think some people would maybe feel uncomfortable or embarrassed about the fact that, like, not wanting to state that a commenter or somebody watching the stream is their dad or whatever. Anyway,
I think it's really cool. I feel like your dad is one of your biggest supporters, and that's really lovely. Thank you for being here.
I think so too. I love that he's here. Anyway, it comes down to how the other person is perceiving what you're doing. Anything that involves how another person is perceiving what you're doing is not a thing that you can predict.
Yeah.
It is something that in the moment you can monitor for unspecific, meaning like non-spoken communication. Right? Like I can read someone's face and be like, oh, I think that might indicate that they're no longer interested in what I'm sharing. Or it can be specific communication when they're saying, I want to talk about something else, or don't want to talk about this anymore, or whatever. So you can monitor for that in the moment. And even then, people are going to sometimes then overly rely on, well, I need to be able to read when someone is no longer interested in what I'm saying without them having to say it.
Yes.
To which then the question will be, why? Why do you need to be able to know that without them saying it? And no matter how good you get at it, I'm pretty good at it, I would think, I still overshare. I still tell people things that they don't necessarily care about hearing. I do my best. You're not going to get it every time. So some of this has to do with that kind of, like we've talked about, people who identify as neurodivergent, and especially people who identify as autistic, have a belief frequently that there are some rules about these things that other people know and they don't know. Like other people don't overshare, or other people know how to tell the difference when it is or isn't oversharing. But the only thing that would tell you that you're oversharing is that somebody else is no longer interested in what you're saying. How are you going to know without talking to them?
Yeah. I think sometimes the issue around it is with feeling like you've committed a huge faux pas, that you should know the rules that everybody else knows, and that you've annoyed the person or bored them and they're never going to want to speak to you again. Kind of, I guess, catastrophizing a little bit.
Yeah, this is another thing that's very common for people who identify as neurodivergent, but also I think is very common for just people who are online a lot.
Yeah.
Is conflating the idea that doing something that somebody doesn't like or doesn't want is the same thing as harming them, which is the same thing as you being a bad person.
Right.
And so these things are treated as though, oh no, I overshared, I'm a terrible person. Instead of, oh, I was talking about something and then it turned out that other person wasn't interested in it, which is just something that happens.
Yeah.
A much more like easy way to distinguish between people who do know how to tell about oversharing versus people who don't, or at least people who think of themselves in this way, is that some people, when they find out that someone isn't interested in what they're talking about, don't think of it as a personal sin. And don't like beat themselves up over it and say, I did something wrong and I hurt this person. Yeah. And some people do treat it that way. And there are reasons why this stuff is more common for people who are identified as neurodivergent, right? Like you have been most likely given reason throughout your life to believe that when you have done something somebody else didn't like, it means you're a bad person. People have told you that. And another word for bad in this case would be deficient.
Yes.
That you should have known to be able to avoid doing the thing that they didn't like. And the fact that you didn't know is some indictment of you. But any person in your life who's ever said that has done things that other people don't like, including, by the way, them saying that thing to you in that moment was them doing something that you didn't like. Why doesn't that make them the bad guy? Which,
That's a very good question. What makes them the authority on your behavior?
right. And that's not a like novel question. In fact, many people go from, oh, people have told me that I'm bad or deficient or done something wrong, and therefore I feel bad and whatever, to wait, no, they're bad for having told me that I'm bad or deficient. And
Mm,
that's valid and wonderfully helpful for people in many circumstances. Sometimes it's problematic for both people, both the person who is now being thought of as the bad one and the person who's thinking of it that way.
yeah.
Because the reality is that people like different things. I don't sit here and talk about Disney Lorcana, even though I'm interested in it right now, because I don't think you're interested in it, Marie. And I don't think that people who are at this stream are interested in it. This isn't advertised as a stream to talk about that kind of stuff.
Speaking of this stream, we have a few comments. I'll just give you the last one. How dare you not be interested in my 10-page rant about my 500-year-old elf cleric's family history? That's very rude of you.
Very well might be rude. Whether it's rude or not, it's silly. Why wouldn't a person be interested in that? I don't understand. I would be interested in that. And a great joke and a great illustration of how people respond to this, right? That if I'm sharing something and you don't like what I'm sharing, well, if your response of not liking it is the valid one, then I'm bad and I overshared and I should learn how to not overshare.
Mhm.
But if your lack of interest is an invalid response and you should be interested in what I'm saying, then it's not about oversharing. It's about why are you so rude?
Yeah.
These things, they're important and they are opinions. And any question which eventually just means, how am I supposed to predict every other person's opinion of everything that I might do to make sure that I only ever do the things that they like? The answer always is, you can't. So there's a lot more to do in, I'm making assumptions here. And if this person who asked this question is here, please, clarify and I'm just reading the comments. His brother makes, and he has a cat named Moxie. That's a great cat name. People don't often put a lot of thought or work into the siblings, the still living siblings of the characters they make in Dungeons and Dragons. So that's intriguing too. D&D characters, like most genre fiction protagonists, tend to be single child orphans. Like no family connections. There's reasons for that. Anyway.
Oh, that's intriguing.
Well, we can talk about that or whatever else. But there's more work for this person in terms of what would be helpful for this person. It would be more helpful for them, I think, to be supported in working on feeling and responding differently when they've learned that they have quote unquote overshared, when they realize that they have shared something that somebody else isn't interested in.
Yeah.
Working on that, your ability to respond to that without feeling bad about it, withdrawing from it, preventing yourself from sharing other things in the future because of it, etc. Responding to it by saying, oh, I learned information that this person isn't interested in what I'm talking about. Good information to have. Let's move forward, right? That would be a much more useful thing for them to work on and be supported in developing than to try and uncover some secret rule about how to know when it's sharing versus oversharing. It's an opinion.
Yes. I guess in an ideal world, you'd be able to just ask, was that too much information? Would you like us to change the subject? But that depends on the level of trust you have with the other person.
Yes, and I am going to point something out that I hated realizing and that other people will probably hate me pointing out. Yeah, that is theoretically a solution, right? Is to stop yourself and say, I'm sorry, I might be rambling. I don't know if you're really interested in what I'm talking about, right? But what if they are? I started doing that for a while.
Okay.
I became very nervous about talking too much and saying things that people don't really want to hear from me and taking over conversations. And so for a while, I was stopping myself and saying, I'm sorry, I know that sometimes I have a tendency to talk about things more than other people are really interested. I just want to make sure, are you actually interested? And of course, sometimes I expressed that clearly, and sometimes it was just like, I'm rambling or whatever. and inviting them to prompt me to continue if they want to.
Mhm.
Then I realized, well, what if they are interested in what you're saying? Am I not then just basically making people beg me to keep talking about something?
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like, if they're not interested, great. I stopped and paused and checked in, and they could say, yeah, not really, and we move on. But hey, that wasn't really my experience. My experience was pretty much every time I said, I'm sorry, I'm rambling, they'd say, no, I'm interested. Please keep going, which made me feel better and less worried about whether I was talking too much until I thought of it in my head as, oh man, I am making people tell me that they like hearing me talk. That seems not great. And it's not that it's not great. Like, you don't have to frame it that way. That's just how I framed it to myself at a certain point that made me not like it. I could frame it
Yeah.
as the other thing. No, I'm checking in. It's not good or bad or right or wrong. But I'm just pointing out there isn't a solution. You are
There is no
sometimes
right way.
going to think somebody wants to hear something and it turns out they don't. And you're going to sometimes think that somebody doesn't care to hear something when it turns out they really would have loved to.
Yeah. I know that for me, when somebody starts talking about their special interest, I generally really want to hear more because I might not know anything about the topic, so I'm learning something. Or just watching somebody's face light up when they're talking about the thing they care about most in the whole wide world is really lovely. I
Mm-hmm.
really enjoy it.
Yeah.
We have another comment here, and I'd love for the commenter to follow up. I have a friend who spends a lot of time listening to other people oversharing, and I'm trying to find ways to give her more space in the conversation. So I'd love to know how you do that.
Well, first, how do you know that they're listening to other people overshare? Have they expressed to you that they are listening to people share things that they are not interested in hearing? Because that's what we're saying would be oversharing, right?
Yeah.
Because it's possible some people, like you were just saying, Marie, sometimes you just like to listen to other people go on and on. Literally, right now, we're at a stream where, like, the whole setup is that you all are listening to me and Marie, and more me than Marie by a good margin, go on and on about stuff without you interjecting too much, right?
Yeah.
We can't make an assumption from the outside. So that would be the first question. Have they expressed to you that this is a problem for them, that they feel as though they spend a lot of their time listening to people share things that they're not interested in? Second, you don't have to respond to that, but you're welcome to. And either way, while we wait, because there's a delay. Secondly, if that is the case, and if theoretically, sorry, that's true, it's possible I'm worrying too much, but it bothers me that it feels like she spends a lot of time monitoring the conversation and prompting people to continue talking. Ooh, well, that's a different thing. But let me say what I was saying before. First, so even if they have expressed that to you and you're wanting to be helpful to them, why would focusing on changing your behavior in order to give them more space help them? Because if this is happening a lot, not just with you, you changing your behavior to give them more space in the conversation might help them in their conversations with you, but it doesn't help them at all in any conversation that you're not a part of where it's happening.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be, if they're a friend of yours and they're safe with you and you're interested in helping them, wouldn't it be more interesting and potentially valuable to them to talk to them about it and explore it together and come up with things that they can do, and then let them practice those things in conversation with you, right?
It's a great idea. Yeah.
Like, okay, so interrupting people might be something that would help them to not feel as though they're listening to people overshare all the time. But interrupting people is scary. But I, friend of mine, I care about this. I don't want to overshare. I would prefer that you interrupt me. I would much rather you interrupt me and tell me that I'm oversharing than let me drone on. I don't want to do that. And then they can practice it, and maybe it gets easier for them to do that in other cases. Removing from them the necessity of interjecting themselves very specifically does not help them to be able to work on interjecting themselves. You're making it so they don't need to, not so that they're more able to. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Just know that that's what you're doing, is you're making it easier for them to converse with you, but not any easier anywhere else.
Okay. The follow-up comment. She rarely actually has a chance to talk about how she's doing. This is usually weekly group chats, and I want her to have more opportunity to share how she's doing with the group, rather than just listening to other people talk about their problems. I wonder, has she complained that that's what's happening? That she's just stuck listening to other people talk about their problems? Or does she like listening to people sharing?
Right. I think Best Insider is aware of this now that, after we pointed it out about whether because they said it's possible I'm worrying too much, but it bothers me. It feels like she spends a lot of time monitoring the conversation. So a lot of language. I'm worrying. It's possible I'm worrying too much, so I'm worrying. It bothers me that it feels like blah 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 blah. She rarely has the chance to talk about that. That relies on the premise that she wants to talk about it more than she is able to talk about it, and that the thing which is preventing her from talking about it is that other people are not giving her the space to, as a some other thing. Like, for example, it's possible that she does want to share more about her week, but she's very shy about it, and it's not about other people oversharing. This is usually about This is usually weekly group chats, and I want her to have more opportunity to share how she's doing with the group. I want her. So this is about your stuff. Yeah, and that's a great comment. I just want to make sure that space is available if she wants it. Would a person do that though? Like, what if she doesn't want the space? You just make everybody be quiet for a while, just to make sure. Generally, do people enjoy like enforced moments of quietness? Or what if she doesn't want to share and jump in? Are you then pressuring her to have to jump in because you're calling her out and saying, everyone be quiet and listen to her? I trust your read of the situation, to be clear.
Yeah.
I believe that you are reading something in her that is leading you to conclude that she wants to be able to jump in more than she is. And whether it's accurate or not, and I believe that it likely is, whether it's accurate or not, the best way to help with that is to talk with her about it. Either way, your next step is to say, hey, I've been getting the sense, or I've been worrying, or I've been reading that maybe you would like some more space to be able to share how you're doing with the group. Am I picking up on something, or blah, 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 blah? Because another possibility is that you're not picking up on anything from this other person about wanting to share more, but just that you want to know more about them. You care to know more about how they're doing and what's going on in their life. But rather than feeling that you're comfortable to just say, hey, how are you doing? I would like to know more about what's going on in your life. You're feeling as though you need to justify it in this kind of backdoor way where it's, no, she must want to tell me more. Why aren't you allowed to ask for more information if you want it? These are all very frustrating questions I'm asking. The problem with a lot of this stuff is that neurodivergent people generally, especially the ones that are like asking these things online and showing up to streams and things like this, have put a lot of thought and effort into resolving these problems already by the time they've gotten to this point.
Yeah.
And so generally are really wanting at this point to say, look, I've been trying on my own. I can't figure it out. Just tell me what the answer is. Like, it's a capitulation. Like, okay, fine, I give up. Somebody tell me what it is. When the truth is, no, if you've been trying that hard to figure it out and you can't figure it out, it's probably something that can't be figured out. Not something that is you specifically. Like, here's an interesting paradox, right? People with ASD, autistic people, like the person who asked the initial question. The premise of that question, the reason that that person stated that they are ASD, that they're autistic, is that being autistic in some way makes you less aware of social customs, or means that you are less aware of social customs. And yet, this person is paying so much attention to other people and how they respond and social customs that they're spending their free time trying to figure it out, going online, asking questions of experts about these social customs. Are the people who don't think of themselves as being deficient in terms of their knowledge of social customs, are those people doing all that? Are they spending their free time going and watching streams and asking questions about them? And if not, because obviously not, then why would we assume that the autistic person has less information when we can demonstrably say that they have done a lot more work to gather information about these social customs? How would it make any sense to say that despite the fact that they're spending all this time thinking about it, that they're hyper vigilant and anxious about whether this person across from me wants to hear what I have to say or not, that they're less aware of it than other people are? How would that be? What would the mechanism be?
Yeah.
Or is it maybe possible that some people at least have identified or had identified for them, often through the lens of being a quote unquote neurodivergent person, that they are deficient and that they do lack information about social customs and other things, empathy and whatever, and that they don't like that and respond by actively getting more information than anybody else does, but still believe that they're deficient because they can't resolve the problem. That the only reason they still feel deficient, even though they have more information about it, pay closer attention, are more careful than other people might be, that they're measuring their behavior against a literally impossible metric of success. I should never, ever, ever say anything to anyone that they're not interested in. Oh, I failed at it again. There must still be something I'm missing.
Is this connected in any way to social sensitivity, which is something you've talked about before?
I think so, yeah. That's kind of the concept I'm presenting without using that term. So I appreciate you calling it back out. Yes. You're paying a lot of attention. Let me ask you this. For anyone who is autistic, identifies as autistic or is identified as autistic, and experiences discomfort with eye contact, why? What is it about the experience of eye contact that is uncomfortable for you? Because I've worked with a lot of people on this, I've talked to a lot of people on this, and every single time, and I'm trying to leave a lot of space for if anybody is watching this and thinking it through in their own head, that they can come to their own answers before I say what everybody else has always told me. Mm-hmm. Every single answer I've ever gotten is, it's too intense. It feels uncomfortably intimate. It's overwhelming. I'm getting too much information. I can't focus on what I'm trying to say because I'm too distracted by what I am seeing in them. All of them are different versions of looking someone in the eye gives me so much information, so much data, that it is disruptive or uncomfortable to me. That sounds like a sensitivity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not a deficit.
No.
Not that you're getting
it's funny because then you'll hear that people who are autistic or identify as autistic, there's this idea that they struggle with reading body language, but maybe it is more about what you're saying, that they're reading everything, micro expressions. They're reading body language so well that they don't know what to direct their attention to because they're getting all that data at once.
Yeah. Is it possible that people are incongruous, right? And that we sometimes say things which are different than what we actually feel, and that what we actually feel might be communicated through other things that we aren't as aware of and don't control as much, like the eyes. Almost like there's a saying in our culture that's ages old about the eyes being the window to the soul.
Yeah.
Right? Meaning that by looking someone in the eye, you can get information about who they truly are at the core of themselves. And that's a little mystical for my taste. I think there is information. In fact, some very interesting research is being done more and more because it's focused on how people interact with technology and eye tracking technology. But research suggesting that tiny little eye movements indicate what a person is thinking and feeling before they are able to express it in any other way.
Oh, wow.
That like when given a task of tracking the direction that dots are moving on a screen and then pressing a button for right or for left, that the eyes will indicate when they're about to press the button for right or when they're about to press the button for left before they can actually press it, which makes sense. It's about taking in data, then the data is used, and then the command is given to the body to use that data. So yes, by watching how people are taking in data, of course, when I see people look at the clock, it suggests to me that they are considering what time is it. And there are different reasons they might be doing that, but a constrained number of reasons, right? So is it possible that when I'm not able to, quote unquote, read somebody's body language, that maybe what their body language is saying to me is different than what their words are saying to me, and
Yeah.
I don't know which one is accurate or correct, or that their body language is even conveying some what's the word I'm looking for? Conflict, internal conflict, right? Like, oh, I really want to eat that cookie, but I shouldn't eat that cookie. Could their body language suggest to me, this person really wants to eat this cookie, but also this person really doesn't want to eat this cookie?
Mm-hmm.
And then I might walk away from that thinking, man, I don't know how to read people.
So back to our commenter, maybe you are picking up data from your friend, and maybe the best thing to do would be to ask them. Maybe you are reading their body language. You're picking up something that they haven't said explicitly.
Yeah. Like I was saying before, it is never to me a question of whether or not your read is accurate. I assume that it is. But it could be wrong, no matter how confident we are in the prediction. But even if it is accurate, there's not a lot of that you can do with that that's very useful to you or to the other person that doesn't involve talking to them to confirm whether your read is accurate or not first.
Yeah.
That, as well as the question before about what's the difference between sharing and oversharing. They have no body language. We don't use cameras and talk online. Yeah, it's not all body language. Another word we would use for this kind of communicative data is called metacommunication, which just means any data which influences the communication that isn't the actual spoken or written communication. Like how long someone pauses before they respond in a group chat is metacommunication. It's not as precise. It could mean different things. Maybe they're distracted and busy by other things. Maybe they were really taken aback by something. Maybe they don't know what to say and they're trying to figure out how to phrase it. Maybe they feel like everyone else is talking too much too quickly and they can't jump in. Could be a lot of things, but it does communicate something to you. This is honestly a tangential thing, but people will talk about telehealth therapy and what I hear people saying all the time that aren't therapists or people who are in therapy and utilizing telehealth is, don't you miss out on so much information, right? Like being in person is better because you get more data. You see more of what's happening with them. You see more of their body, which is valid. There's information you get that you have access to when you meet with somebody in person that you don't have access to when you meet with online.
Yeah.
And there's information you get when you meet with somebody online that you don't have access to in person. Like, how are they relating to the camera? When do they look at the camera or look away? How have they posed themselves? What is it that's behind them? What are they doing? What is on the desk in front of them? Like, not to say, I'm not comparing and say you get more information or different or less information either way. I'm saying this is a very common mistake in many different ways, is to say, well, the way we know contains all this stuff, and this new way, observably and demonstrably, is missing some of the stuff that the way we know had. And the conversation stops there instead of, well, does the new way contain anything that the way we know didn't contain? I mean, especially we're on a stream right now, like everybody here, including you and I, Marie, we know that there are many, many things that people can do online and remotely to communicate with one another that you can't do in person.
Yeah.
Emojis and GIFs and memes are one example of that. Although it's very interesting to watch, like my 7-year-old and just younger people in general kind of incorporate memes into live conversation. It's very interesting. I do go.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about that now. I've definitely done that.
Yeah. Leads to a lot of like audio memes being used a lot more than visual memes.
Yeah. Follow-up comment. I do put a lot of energy into reading tone since it's just about the only data I have, and that's about this weekly meetup with this friend. It feels to me like she feels obligated to prompt other people to share to continue the conversation and not to share herself until someone else prompts her. But I feel like I don't know enough about her to prompt.
All right, Bast Insider, you're getting a firsthand experience of why people love and hate talking to me, because it's very frustrating. What the hell do you mean you feel like you don't know enough about her to prompt? what is it to prompt someone to share information? Isn't that typically just, how was your day? How was your week? What do you think? Is there some other version of a prompt that you're looking for that is different from just asking a person for information that you are interested in getting from them? How well do you have to know somebody to know how to prompt them in some other way than just saying, I would like to hear about your week? Or
Yeah.
is what you mean, I'm not sure, I don't know enough about them to be positive that they would want me to prompt them when I do? Which would
Yeah.
also mean that you feel as though you don't know them well enough to be sure that they do want to jump in more. That's just a different way of saying the same thing. And if you do ask them for information or prompt them to say something about themselves, even if they don't want it in that moment, does that mean you did something wrong? You're stuck, right?
Mm.
What if they want to share more information? Well, then in that case, it would be really good for you to ask for more information. What if they don't want to share more information? Well, then it will be bad for you to ask for more information. Okay, so that's not safe. Can't do that. But also, if you don't ask them for information, but they do want to share more, then that's bad too. Literally, you've constructed a way of approaching this that means that there is nothing for you to do that isn't the bad way. If you don't ask, that might be bad. If you do ask, that might be bad. Frustrating.
Yeah. So what's the solution, Brandon? Like, to me, it's just maybe ask and be prepared for them to say, I don't want to talk about it.
There is no solution, but yes, that's a good one. I mean, the fact that you have to prepare yourself, and I often, or at least in the past, often have had to do this and don't have to do it as much anymore. Prepare yourself in advance for the idea that they might not like the question that you're asking. Sure, but that's, it's effortful.
It is, yeah.
And what if, because you already are reading this person as somebody that you think might feel obligated to prompt conversation even though they don't want to, what if that means that they're also somebody who feels obligated to answer a question even if they don't want to? Well, then if you ask a question but they don't want to answer it, they will anyway, and they'll never tell you. So that's bad. There is no solution. There is this, though. The only way for you to know is if they tell you.
Mm-hmm.
Might they say they want to when they don't really? Yeah, people lie sometimes. Might they say they don't want to when they really do? Yes, people lie sometimes. And what I'm pointing out is, if you treat people like they're lying to you, then there is nothing but anxiety for you down that path. You just have to trust them. If they say that they're fine, whether you think that's true or not, you have to act like it is. Because the moment that you think that somebody might be lying, literally anything anybody has ever said to you or could ever say might be a lie. And then what are you doing? How do you make any decisions or do anything with no information to go on, because any information you got was unreliable, could be a lie?
We just never leave the house.
Oh, and look what ends up happening with a lot of us who think of all of this as, I'm a bad person if I unintentionally do something that somebody doesn't like. I just stop doing anything that anyone ever notices and isolate myself, but still feel anxious all day long about the possibility that I might someday do something that somebody doesn't want me to do, or that I am the kind of person who would do something that somebody doesn't want me to do. So I'm not actively doing it anymore, but I'm just as anxious, if not more, about the possibility that I might, or that I might be someone who would. So here is this mean trick that I use over and over and over, because I would love to take things like this where people feel bad or guilty or anxious about something and explain to them why that isn't necessary and have them to just stop feeling anxious and bad and whatever. That's really difficult, and I work on it a lot, and I hope that some of it comes across in basically anything we do. But what's a lot easier and more likely to work is to shift that feeling bad and guilty and anxious from that thing to something else. I'm going to say something you're not going to like, past and cider, I'm guessing, and please tell me to go jump off a cliff or whatever. Maybe that's a bad joke, but I'm just saying, express your disagreement or displeasure with me, please, if I'm doing something or saying something that you don't like. Why are you trying to control this person?
Oh, okay.
Aren't they allowed to do whatever they want to do? Like, if they want to prompt conversation, even if that's because they feel obligated to and it's the proper thing, aren't they allowed to do that? Or more importantly, if you were to ask them a question and they don't like it, aren't they allowed to not like it? So why are you preventing them from having the opportunity to respond to it in whatever way they feel like responding to it? It
Okay,
seems
so that's very fair.
it seems very noble and self-sacrificing and helpful. It feels that way to say, well, a person might not like it if I do X, so I won't do X. But isn't that person allowed to not like it? Aren't they allowed to feel however they feel about whatever they feel about it? So you just don't want them to feel that way because you don't want them to feel that way, which is understandable. And there's nothing wrong with, I don't want them to feel uncomfortable or bad or whatever. So I'm not going to do this thing that they might not like because I don't want them to feel the way they would feel if I did something that they don't like. So I'm going to make sure they don't feel that way. I'm going to make them feel happy and comfortable, and I'm going to make them like me. I'm going to make sure that they don't feel unhappy with anything that I do. And all of a sudden, it doesn't feel so noble and self-sacrificing anymore. It feels more controlling, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same thing either way. Just like I was saying before, am I checking in to see if people are interested in and giving them the opportunity to shift the conversation? Yes. Am I putting people in a position in which they have to ask me to continue to talk to them about something I'm enjoying talking to them about? Yes. It's frame it whichever way you want to frame it, because that's kind of the whole point. It's not about good or bad or right or wrong or correct or incorrect. These rules don't exist. That's the largest source of distress for people who identify as neurodivergent when talking about socialization is they have this steadfast belief that these rules exist, and the fact that they don't know them is evidence of their deficiency, not evidence of the fact that the things don't exist.
I feel like some people will find that very freeing, and other people will go, "Well, what the hell do I do now? There are no rules. What now? What happens next?"
Yes, the people who respond in the second way we typically refer to as neurodivergent.
Hello.
No, I don't like that. Tell me what the rule is.
Yeah.
I feel more comfortable. I would rather feel like I'm deficient, but believe there are rules that can be learned than to accept that, no, I'm not deficient in this particular way. There just are no rules to this. That's way worse to me than to think, no, everybody else knows that there is order to how all this operates. I just don't know it. Yeah, some people, in fact, I would actually say everybody feels that way with some things. Which things it is, what proportion it is, how exactly intense is the feeling and the responsibility and whatever.
Are you telling me, this is a comment, are you telling me social interactions are just pure chaos?
Yep.
Yay!
And again, when we're talking about something which is not shocking to most people, even most people who identify as neurodivergent would sign off on, like, yes, life is absurd and unpredictable and everything is chaos. You can't know how everything will happen in advance. Intellectually, theoretically, most people would sign off on, yeah, that sounds right. But that is not a way to live.
No.
Right? Like, my ridiculous example that I use for this all the time is, right now, Marie, you and I are both acting as though it is true that gravity works exactly the way that it does and that it will continue to do so for at least the next 30 seconds or so.
Mm-hmm.
Actively thinking about that and drawing that conclusion and making that decision every moment. But I can say accurately that we are both acting as though it is true, because if we weren't sure that that was true, we would be doing very different things than what we are currently doing. If I was concerned that gravity would cease to function 30 seconds from now, I would probably have more important things on my mind than talking to you about this. Certainly wouldn't be drinking like hot tea out of an open mug.
Yeah, right.
I'd be calling everybody I care about. Susan, are you indoors somewhere? I'm at the ceiling right now. Do I know that that is true? No. How could I know that? that gravity is and always has worked exactly the way that I understand it to work, and that it is and it will always continue. Of course, I don't know that's true, but I have to act as though it is.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, it's chaos, it's absurd, it's unpredictable. You cannot know any of these things, but you have to act as though there is some predictability, some order to it. Yeah, placing handholds on my ceiling. This is an actual thing I've thought of many points in my life. I don't know if that's a common thing or not, but there have been many times in my life where I'm like, what if gravity reversed right now?
Yeah, right.
Anyway, yeah, it's chaos, and that is scary.
Mm-hmm.
People, especially in our culture, although I don't think this is unique to our culture, people are much more comfortable with the idea that everything works as it should. And the reason that things aren't working the way I want it to is because I'm doing something wrong. But I am in total control of everything that happens to me. If I want anything different to happen to me, I can make it happen if I just learn how to act or think differently. It's more
And then
comfortable.
we can get kind of caught up in trying to predict the future,
Yep.
predict any and all possible outcome
Yep.
from any interaction.
Which would be very anxiety inducing and overwhelming. It would make the possibility, the thought of interacting with people very anxiety inducing. It would almost result in, an experience of social anxiety or something like that, especially when those people that you might be interacting with, or when the situation in which you are interacting with people is one you don't have much experience with and don't know as much about, something new and different, where you don't feel as though you know the rules. Wow, you really wouldn't want to do that. Oh, wait. Any patterns we notice about people who really don't want to go out into social situations they don't have a lot of experience with, and hanging out with people, spending time with and interacting with people they don't know very well?
Yeah.
It's scary. I wish I had a way to tell people that this is all ordered and understandable and you can figure out everything in advance and nothing ever that you don't want to happen will ever happen. That'd be nice. It's not true, and it doesn't work that way. I mean, even people who like don't care about worrying whether it is true and actionable still don't try and give that message because it's so absurd and ridiculous. Even people who are actively trying to scam you and whatever still don't say you can act and think and behave in such a way that anything that ever happens in your life, everything that happens in the world, is exactly what you want it to be. Of course not. The closest they'll get is they'll say, no, you can't control the world, but you can control how you feel, which is also incorrect. But at least, when they're trying to get you to do things the way that they think you should. Sometimes genuinely in good faith because they think that you will benefit from doing it the way that they're telling you to do it. But no, you can't control the way you feel. What? Never get sleepy, Marie.
Okay, done. Yeah.
Never be surprised by anything. You can control to some limited extent how you respond, how you behave
Mm-hmm.
in response to what you think and what you feel.
Yeah.
But you can't control how you feel. You can do things to try and make yourself feel differently. Oh, I'm angry, but if I do this exercise, that'll help me calm down. Or if I eat some food, that'll help me be less irritable. Or, yeah, you can do things. You don't just, by force of will, control it. You don't choose it. It happens. Then you can do some stuff. And your ability to do stuff is limited. And that's not hypothetical or theoretical. It's directly observable. It's self-evident. It's provable. Because go ahead, stay awake. Just forever.
How long does it take before I will lose my mind?
Right. Something super common, especially for co-parenting couples, especially when one or both people identify as neurodivergent. Because people who identify as neurodivergent, we have a tendency to really rely on communication. We might think we're bad at it, but when you think you're bad at it,
You work really hard at it.
yep, not all the time, but if you think you don't understand what your spouse is feeling just by observing them, then you ask them about it more.
Yeah.
If you think that you're so strange and unpredictable that your spouse couldn't possibly know what you're thinking, then you tell them about it more. Anyway, when people like that become parents, get into co-parenting situations. As those kids get older, especially the young child age where they're old enough to like interrupt you and follow you around and ask you for things even when you're not expecting it, but not old enough to be able to really understand like how to wait for the time to talk about, like wait for someone else to finish talking, whatever. You get interrupted constantly. So these couples, they can't talk about things the way that they're used to being able to talk about things in order to navigate difficulties. And by the time they can, it's nighttime and the kids are asleep. And you would think, oh, well, then these people are going to spend, like, as soon as the kids are asleep, they're going to talk and catch up on all that stuff. But it doesn't happen. Why? Because they're exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
You have a limited ability to control the things that you do. And it gets depleted. And these young parents, myself being one of them, you're not sleeping as much. You're not attending to your own needs, your own joy, your own whatever as much because there's other stuff going on that's higher priority and more important to you now. So you're more tired at 8 p.m. than you ever have been at 8 p.m. in your life previously. So you have fewer resources available at that time. And now you're going to try and do something that was always difficult, right? Like these kinds of conversations are not things that you're doing while you're in the middle of a social environment, right? We're at a party. Oh, let's quickly talk for 20 seconds about something difficult until someone interrupts us and then we'll get back to it. No, it's taxing and it takes focus and attention. Yeah. And you don't have a lot of that. And they think instead of seeing it that way, as is very like clear and self-evident, it's obvious, resources and depletion, whatever. They just think, oh, we've lost the spark. We shouldn't be feeling the way that we're feeling. We should be. One of the most common things in couples therapy, neurodivergent or not, the research has, as far as I know, has not. The research I know of did not account for neurodivergence in this research. One of the most common things in couples therapy is people coming in, especially as they're getting older and further into their lives, with children potentially and or career, but things generally taking more and more of their time and energy. And lamenting that their sex life is not what it used to be, that they don't have sex as frequently as they used to. And the obvious solution that everybody knows is, well, you have to schedule it like you schedule everything else in your life. As you get busier, it's more important to make sure that you set time aside for certain things. Yeah. But there's a belief that sexual interaction should be spontaneous, and scheduling it ruins it, and that takes the magic out, and that just means we're still failing at it. So one of the very most common things that happens in couples therapy is that the therapist will have to talk to the couple about, like it or not, you've got to schedule it if you want it to happen.
Yeah.
People just don't like to accept the things that they don't want to be true. It's no different for neurodivergent. I know that's a common thing for neurodivergent people to say about neurotypicals, but neurodivergent people do it too. It's just a human thing. I don't like the idea that that's how I would have to do it. Yeah. How many different people will do something, get medication or a tool or an accommodation or support from a friend or a family member or someone else, and it helps them with what they're trying to get help with. But then the response is to say, I don't want to have to rely on that.
Yes.
I wish that I was able to do exactly what I just did or experience exactly what I just experienced, with the context being different than it was. How does that make any sense? Context matters.
That brings us right back to the start where we were talking about context and communication. We're a minute up to the hour. I know we started a little bit late. So do you have time or do you have something else to get to?
I have a little bit of time, but something else to get to. Help me wrap this up. I know as usual things.
Well, something else that came up in that comment today was about healthy regular sharing versus obsessing. And I think it's hard to know exactly what they meant by that comment, but I think they meant oversharing or fixating on a topic. We do have an episode where we talked about hyperfixations.
My read of that actually is that that's a separate question from the sharing and oversharing. That they're saying, okay, independent of another person, how do I tell versus I'm spending a healthy amount of time and energy and awareness and attention on a thing? versus I'm obsessing. And the like parallel to that is in communication with someone else. How do I know it's sharing versus oversharing? So obsession equates to oversharing is the way I'm reading it. Is that what you're reading?
Yeah, that makes sense.
And unfortunately, and I'll be faster about this because we're at the end and I totally forgot about that part of the question. The answer is pretty similar. You don't know. In particular, health is a concept that is not very useful in this scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you ask anyone what does healthy mean, mostly they'll just say it means healthy. It means good for you. Healthy versus unhealthy. But break it down in observable terms. And most people don't know how to do that. We just talk about it like it is an unquestioned. It's kind of like as a former teacher of, young kids, sometimes you'll say, hey, do this thing or don't do that thing. And they'll say, why? And if you say, because it's not safe, they'll almost always accept it. They're like, yeah, okay, safety. Cool. I know that's important. I've been taught.
Yeah.
Health is the same kind of thing where if you say to somebody, hey, do this or don't do this or whatever, and they say, why? And you say, because it's unhealthy. Oh, okay, gotcha. But what does it really mean? It is about predicting the future.
Mm-hmm.
We say eating X kind of a thing is an unhealthy thing to do. What we mean is that we have research and evidence to suggest that in large numbers, statistically speaking, that when people do this thing, which we are now calling healthy, it correlates with good outcomes, desirable outcomes later. Or when they do this thing, which we're labeling as unhealthy, it correlates with undesirable outcomes later. But do people smoke a pack a day and never get lung cancer and live to the age of 100 and have a happy life? Yep, it happens. We all know that. And do people who do every healthy thing in the book still get sick and suffer and even die at very young ages? Yep, it happens. Statistically speaking, those things happen at a lower rate than the alternative. So that still means it's a good idea not to be smoking.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a fundamental misunderstanding of what statistics is. Statistics has zero relevance to an individual case. That is the point of statistics. There would be no point to evaluating things in a statistical way, meaning taking a lot of data and evaluating that data in sum total. There would be no point to it if individual cases had any sort of predictability to them. Right? So we love it when people are like, oh, pregnant women should eat a lot of eggs. Oh, no. Turns out 5 years later, you should not eat a lot of eggs when you're pregnant. Oh, no. Turns out 10 years later, yes, you should eat a lot of eggs. Or chocolate's bad for you. Oh, wait, no, research says that chocolate's actually good for you. Oh, but this other research says that chocolate is bad for your weight and weight is bad for you. Oh, but did they account for the way that people are mistreated in the medical system if they are overweight? I don't know. So again, it's the same thing. You're trying to predict the future and you can't.
Your dad has a comment. According to my research, it's neither safe or healthy to avoid cake.
Yeah.
I agree. but I'm not an expert. I just like cake.
Yeah. Which is the actual answer to the question. How do I know if it's healthy versus obsession? Well, we have to define what you mean by obsession. And just like sharing or oversharing, there are many different ways of defining that are all valid. It depends on the individual and whatever. But by and large, I'm going to say that most people are going to say that the difference between a healthy interest and an obsession is that the extent to which I am engaging with this thing is causing me problems. So how would I know if this thing is healthy interest or obsession? Is it causing you problems? If so, what are those problems? And then I would take that through the lens of cost and value and say that any problem which is caused by the extent to which you are engaging with this thing that you enjoy engaging with, that's part and parcel of, like you're enjoying engaging with it. Even if it is an obsession, the act of engaging with it is enjoyable. It just causes you these other problems that are regrettable. So then the question becomes, are those costs that you're willing to pay in order to get the value out of it that you're getting, the enjoyment and whatever else? Some people, if they spent $100 on Magic the Gathering cards, that's a big problem and a sign that was me most of my life. If I were to do that, that would mean there's some other bill that's probably more important than buying cards that's going unpaid. And that would indicate to me that it's an obsession in that case. Other people can spend $100 on Magic the Gathering cards and it causes no problem. So how do we say, is spending $100 on those cards a healthy interest or an obsession?
Mm.
It's on the context. And specifically, it depends on, does it cause you problems? And those problems, if you think of them as a cost you are paying in order to engage with the thing that you're enjoying the way you are, is it something that you're willing to engage with? Or you're willing to pay those costs in order to engage with it that way? If not, then yeah, call it an obsession, or actually another term that's used a lot for something that meets that criteria is an addiction.
Yeah.
That if you're engaging with something that you enjoy in some way, shape, or form, to the extent or the way in which you're engaging with it is causing you other problems that you are not willing to make that trade, you would rather that the balance be different, but you're unable to change that on your own, we call that an addiction. So that's the question. Is it healthy interest or is it obsession? Is it causing you problems? There's an article a few years back, probably 10, 15 years back at this point, that I used to share a lot that I loved, that said, video gaming is as addictive as gardening. Because we talk all the time about, for a gambling addict, gambling stimulates the brain in the same way that drugs do, which is true. And it is also true when a person who loves gardening gardens, or when a person who loves socializing socializes. It's just what happens in the brain when you're doing something that you really enjoy. There's nothing inherently problematic about that.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't mean that none of these things become problems. They do, and things become problems at different rates and whatever. But yes, the question is it causing you problems, and are those problems a greater cost than you're willing to pay? If so, let's call it an obsession or an addiction, and let's do something about it. And if not, then anybody who's trying to tell you it's an obsession or an addiction, I believe in taking in information for other people. It's possible that it's causing problems for me in ways that I don't recognize, but somebody else does. So I want to listen to what they're suggesting to me and consider it. But I'm not going to automatically say, somebody else says it's unhealthy, it's an obsession. But I want to know their reasoning and their evidence and consider it, not just automatically say they're right, I love this too much. Because just like with addiction, notice, this is a fun little mind-blowing thing. Notice, if what we mean by addiction is the extent to which you engage with it is greater than you want to, you're doing it more than you want to be doing it, or to the extent that it's causing you significant problems, which is like the technical definition. Well, that could theoretically apply to anything a person does, right? A person could knit to the point that it causes them problems or more than they want to.
Yeah.
A person could play with their child to the point that it causes them. So why, as a culture, do we only use the term addiction when it's related to something that's kind of a 7 deadly sins?
Your dad has commented, is it an obsession or expertise?
Yeah.
So there's a question for the academics out there.
No one's ever been a gardening addict, but there are plenty of gambling addicts.
Yeah.
No one's ever been a knitting addict, but there are plenty of pornography addicts, drug addicts, alcohol addicts, video games, social media, internet, screens generally. That's a stand-in for sloth, laziness addicts.
It's about social judgment, right?
What's that?
It's about social judgment. What we judge to be useful and worthwhile and what we don't.
Yes, it's all opinion-based. And opinions are valuable, but they're not right or wrong. And yes, if 99% of people have one opinion and 1% has the other opinion, I would really suggest that 1%, even when it's me, really give some consideration to what everybody else thinks, because there might be some good, valid reason that everybody else thinks that way. But sometimes there isn't. Or at least sometimes the good, valid reason is really just because that's what they've been taught, not inherent to the belief that they hold or the opinion that they hold. So in the same way we apply addiction that way, look at the way we talk about people being obsessed. And notice that like addiction gets applied to the 7 deadly sins, obsession gets applied to things that people are only supposed to like when they're children.
Yeah.
Not only, but more so. You're obsessed with anime. You're obsessed with baseball.
It's time you grew out of this. Yeah.
But if you spend 8 hours a day reading political blogs and listening to political podcasts, well, then you're just well informed. That's not an obsession. And in fact, it's bad if you do less than that, because now you're putting your head in the sand. Or if you spend all of your time volunteering, you're not obsessed with volunteering, you're just really selfless. It's just opinion based. And that doesn't mean that those opinions aren't valuable. They are. Just weigh them for what they are. They're opinions. They matter more or less depending on the context. When it's about something that's happening to a given person, their opinion probably matters more than anybody else's. When it's about something that's happening to a large group of people, the majority opinion probably matters proportionately more than the minority opinion, which isn't to say that the minority opinion shouldn't matter at all, because obviously it should. But yeah, when 7 out of 10 people like a thing, and we have to make a decision that impacts all 10 people, probably about 70% of the time we should go with the thing that 7 out of 10 people would prefer. Not all the time, but proportionately, Anyway, I'm getting off on all different kinds of things.
Yeah. We've gone 10 minutes over, 11 minutes over time, so I guess we should wrap up.
Yeah.
In conclusion, if you feel like you're rambling, maybe ask.
If you're worried about how you're impacting somebody, ask them about how you're impacting them.
Yeah.
If you don't feel comfortable and safe to do that, then to some extent you can work on your own ability to feel comfortable and safe in asking questions like that. Or you look at the context and the reasons that you feel uncomfortable or unsafe asking that and try to adjust the context. Yeah, if you are experiencing this a lot in contexts in which you are not able to ask somebody, then let's see if we can be in those contexts less frequently, or if there's some other thing that you can bring into them, or yes, how you respond to it. Great. But you cannot predict everything. Most importantly, whatever you do to try and resolve these problems, make sure that you measure success on a spectrum and not in a binary sense.
Yeah.
If you're trying not to overshare, you won't be able to never overshare, but you can make changes that make it so that it happens less frequently, or that when it does happen, you recognize it and correct for it more quickly, that it has a less of a negative impact or more of there are changes that can be made. So if you're working on that stuff, if you evaluate it on a binary sense, if you were to shift it into a different context for metaphor, if you are addicted to heroin and you're trying to quit it, and you stop, you don't use heroin for 2 weeks, and then you use heroin. Yeah, we call that a relapse and whatever. Well, you went 2 weeks without using it. That's better than 2 weeks with using it every day, right?
Yeah.
And what if you relapse and then you go 20 years clean and then you use it again? We call another relapse. If you measure things on a binary, I do it or I don't do it, then after going 20 years, you feel worse about the relapse than after going 2 weeks, because you put in so much effort and you still have this problem. Oh, you threw it all away and you've done so well on whatever. But if you measure it on a spectrum, as opposed to a binary, well, going 2 weeks is good. Going 20 years is a lot better. Using it when you used it, still not what you wanted to do, and it's not ideal, so you make more adjustments. But you learn from all the good things you did over the 20 years that helped you go that long, and keep using it instead of throwing all that away and saying, well, none of it worked because I ended up using it again anyway.
Yeah.
If you measure it in a binary, even the things that help you, you will throw them away the next time that it happens. You'll say, well, anything I tried, even if it actually made it much better, didn't solve the problem completely and therefore didn't work for me, and I got to start from scratch. You'll never get anywhere that way.
And it's worth keeping in mind that everybody gets it wrong sometimes.
Yes.
Everybody.
It's important to adjust how you respond, how you monitor for the information that you're getting it wrong, how you respond when you realize that you have gotten it wrong. Those are way more important things than trying to make sure you don't ever get it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I really got to go.
All right. Thank you for being with us in that. Thank you to the person who asked that or made that comment on Blue Sky. I might get us a Blue Sky account at some point. So
I have to talk to you about these social things.
Yeah.
It's happening now that Twitter is no longer a thing.
Yeah. Look, Blue Sky is looking like a fun alternative. It's like Twitter Lite. Anyway, thanks for being here. The stream will go out again on Wednesday on the YouTube channel, and you can always reach us at effectiveartistry.com if you want to get in touch. Have a great week. Thanks again, Brandon.
Thank you, Marie. Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everybody.